Whoa, 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 whoa.
Oh.
I'll hit you the button. Okay.
Hello and welcome to Maths Week Ireland's event today. This is for secondary schools, and we're delighted to be able to bring you a presentation from the Society of Actuaries. Now, we also have in our studio audience today, we're coming from Holy Rosary College in Mount Bellew in County Galway. So you guys are all really welcome, and we're delighted to have you. We also welcome schools that are watching via the web. At the end of the presentation, we'll have time for questions. If some of the schools watching through the internet or YouTube, if you guys want to tweet at Maths Week, if you guys have any questions or comments. So my name is Owen Gill. I am the founder of Maths Week Ireland, and it's now 15 years old, and it's running in every county in Ireland. And we have over a third of the schools in Ireland are doing special events in school this week. And we have, at the moment, about 355,000 pupils signed up for events, and you guys are all part of that. So we thank you, and we thank the teachers who put in so much work to make it successful. And the reason we do it is because maths is important. It's going to be important in your lives, and whatever job you go into, whatever path you take, you're going to have to be able to do your basic maths, and the more maths you have, the more you can use. So we're delighted to have Davy, Orla and Lynn from the Society of Actuaries to talk about the importance of maths in everyday life. So Ben, if you can just run ahead with that, thanks.
Thanks for taking the time to chat today, guys, on our topic, that's everyday count.
Volume, Ben.
How about we start with some introductions, and maybe we'll share a fact about ourselves that is in some way.
Bear with me one moment.
Okay, these are the issues with live broadcasting, and we just try and get you that volume again.
Thanks for taking the time to chat today, guys, on our topic, that's everyday count. How about we start with some introductions, and maybe we'll share a fact about ourselves that is in some way related to numbers or maths. So I'll kick it off. My name is Orla, and I work as what's known as an actuary.
Thanks, Orla. I also work as an actuary, and I've also worked as an actuary for 5 years. A fact about me is I am really passionate about GAA. I love all things GAA. And I'm a coach. I coach my local club's under-21 team, and I'm also a player. So maybe where I've used maths in the recent past as one of those things, as a player, I'm the free kick taker for my team. So every time my team gets a free kick, I have to ask myself, how far out is it? Do I have a long enough kick to go for a point? How long is left in the game? What's the score? Do we need a point? Do we need a goal? And probably some other things as well. So there's 3 or 4 math things.
And what about you, Lynn?
Hello, my name's Lynn, and I am Australian Chinese, and I am actually as well living and working in Dublin at the moment. One fact relating to maths, I had to actually look this up just now. The longest running distance I've ever done is for 26.2 miles, which is 42.195 kilometers.
My goodness.
That was a marathon, as you might have guessed, and that was back in a couple of years ago in Greece.
I'm glad my fact came before yours, because that's a very impressive fact to do with that. But lots of us encounter maths, I think, in our everyday life, and maybe a lot more than we realize or we're tuned into. So if you're open to it, would you each tell me the story of your day so far, and we'll see how many times you happened upon numbers or maths or something to do with using your numerical skills. Who wants to go first?
I'll go.
Great. I'm going to count them on my.
So I got up this morning at 8 a.m. So I set an alarm a little bit later than I would a few months ago because of lockdown. So we're working from home. So I then went out for a quick run, 20-minute run, where I used an app, Map My Run, and that tells me my average pace, my distance covered, and my time elapsed. And that helps me figure out if I need to run faster, if I need to run slower, to get my time into the time that I want. Came home then, had a shower, so I had to set the temperature of the shower. That just about counts. Then I went down to the shops to bought a coffee with some change.
Counter change.
Yes, yeah.
Great.
I also bought a scone. Then I came home and started working. And then I started using maths a whole lot more.
Okay, so you have at least 10 from, let's say, 8 o'clock this morning until maybe 9:30 or 10 o'clock this morning. Do you normally think of all of those encounters you have every day in your day-to-day routine as related to maths, or is this the first time you've really thought about it like that?
Well, the first time I thought about it was when you asked me to think about it.
Yeah, so there you go. 10 times before you even started work, you used maths. What about you, Lynn? If you were to tell the story of your day earlier today, how many times do you think you've used maths? I can count again.
I think there's a lot of similarities with David. Like I set alarm, but sometimes I don't, I put on snooze for another 5 minutes and then another 5 minutes. So yeah, that's, you can add that. And then I'll try to go for a morning walk or run for 10 minutes. So I have a iWatch which tracks number of steps. I sometimes look my heart rate, because sometimes my heart rate gets, I always check against the average heart rate. If it's too high or too low, it helps me to know if I'm doing okay. And then I'll come home. I'll make breakfast. It's quite fixed. I'll have like a couple of eggs, so that's 2 eggs a day. So and then I do read sometimes the nutritional information. I don't know if you guys into that, how many carbs and nutrition, like I think it does help. I know sometimes if you eat something sweet, but it's not necessarily really high in calories, so it's good to double check that it is actually low but still tastes good. So try to always look for that. So I check that. Any food you have, you can see the back package. And then I would log into work. I would when we start working, there's numbers all the time.
I can't count on 2 hands beyond once we log in because it's too difficult. Some other things I think I would come across in my daily routine, which is very similar to both of you, much the same as you've mentioned, Lynn. I wear a Fitbit during the day, so I'm always counting my steps to make sure that I'm not just sitting here in my living room as we work from home at the minute. Sometimes, because I live in Dublin, I will be looking for the bus numbers as they pass to get the bus into town. That's more when we were working in the town, or in the city centre. But that's something I'm tuned into quite a bit. And then I really enjoy baking. So as not to make a complete mess of what I want to eat any given day, I usually have to use my weighing scales, weigh everything out to the best of my ability, and hope that it will come out looking like what it should on the recipe. But I think we are all probably a little bit more tuned in now to the extent to which we're using maths every day, and pat on the back for the amount of time we actually spend using maths outside of the working hours. But maybe then to think of your school maths and maths your experience of what we would think of as maths when you were in school, what do you think was the most difficult thing about doing your maths homework when you were in school? So I can start and say what it was for me. Um, Oftentimes you're adding things like X's and Y's, and in real life, I don't encounter a whole lot of X's and Y's. So it didn't seem like something I was ever going to need to use per se. It seemed quite abstract. So I thought it was quite difficult to get to grips with some of the material because it wasn't related to daily life in the same way that English or PE or some of the other subjects were. Davy, what do you think was challenging about maths in school?
Actually, one of the challenges for me, Orla, was um, I played a lot of sport in school. So I played soccer and GAA and even tennis. And sometimes, if we had a game on, you would miss class for the game, which you get to do in secondary school sometimes, which is a great perk of playing sports. But it also means that you can fall behind a little bit in class, and particular with a subject like maths, it's really important that you're in class and you're hearing the teacher's explanations and things like that. So for me, a challenge was managing the sport and the maths at the same time. And it just meant I had to do a little bit extra in the evenings, maths wise. And sometimes when I did have a maths class, I'd hang back later on and ask the teacher a couple of questions. So that was actually my experience of a challenge, maths related.
What about you, Lynn? Were there things that you found challenging when you were back in school doing your math?
I suppose, yeah, there's a lot of repetition in maths in some way, because I feel like, you need to sort of do enough practice sometimes to really understand something or to really get better at a particular topic. So I think that was a challenge, is get enough practicing, try to get enough questions and attempt to do enough questions after school. So I think, yeah, it helps if I try to sort of make like a game, or maybe just give yourself a really short time, like 5 minutes, and just try to get in as much and give yourself a reward at the end or something like that.
Working against the clock.
Yes, so.
Which also counts as using maths. So you're getting an extra maths homework there.
Just have a little reward and tick off, and yeah, or playing games with your siblings or your parents.
Yeah, playing cards and playing other games. And then, so we've already kind of touched on it in playing our maths orientated game. Do you think that maths crops up a lot more in your hobbies, your interests, your life, maybe outside of school or work, more than you might think? So for me, I think it does, particularly at the minute when you're working from home. I like to go outside, but you need to be conscious at the minute of not meeting more than a certain number of households or a certain number of people, or maybe you need to tune into the distance that you're going, because depending on restrictions, maybe we can't go a certain distance, but you still want to get lots of steps in, or you want to get your run. So I think at the minute, especially, I'm using maths a lot more to understand the different reference points outside of my daily routine that are maybe told by the government or by my colleagues or by my peers, my classmates, my friends. And maths is kind of popping up for me a little bit all over the place. So what about you, Davy? Does it make an appearance in your hobbies or your interests that might surprise you or me?
Absolutely, Orla, yes. So I mentioned earlier on that when I play GAA, where I use maths, but also as a coach in particular, I have to use maths an awful lot. So, for example, let's say we have a game that throws in at 2 p.m. We might decide to meet at 1:30. So that 30-minute period before the game, we need to have a schedule and we need to be very well organized. So, for instance, we might say 5 minutes to let out the players to put the boots on and tog out. 8 minutes then for a warm up, so a jog around. 7 minutes then for some ball work drills, so some kicking, some passing. So that's 20 minutes. And then we might come back together and have the final team talk and the last messages. That might be, say, 6 minutes. And then if it's an important game, there might be a national anthem, which is another 3 minutes. So that all adds up to 29 minutes. I'll usually leave a minute or two spare just in case anything runs over. But that schedule has to be planned out in advance. Then you might get to, say, half time in the game. And I'd ask the statistician of our team, how are we doing on kickouts? So he might say, when we went high and long with the kickouts, we won 1 of 5. And when we went short and low with our kickouts, we won 8 of 10. So I quickly work out that we won 20% of the long kickouts, but 80% of the short ones. So the strategy then for the second half becomes quite clear. We won't go long with any of our kickouts. We'll go short with all of them because that's where we're getting the most success. And what that also might do is it might feed into a decision to bring in a smaller fast player and take off one of the tall, less mobile players because they're more likely to win those short kickouts. So it's interesting how maths really feeds into that decision-making process. So you might think that, you know, GAA and maths or sport and maths are not related or not linked. But actually maths is very central to some of those decisions that coaches and managers would make.
Do you think when you're playing, so I don't play GAA, so I don't understand as well as you do what goes on the pitch, but do you think when you're on the pitch and you're watching the scoreboard and you're watching the clock running down and you're trying to communicate with your fellow teammates, there's actually quite a lot of maths going on and people don't even realize in that time or in that moment in time that they're doing all of these, let's say, sums in their brain in that moment?
Yes, definitely. Like it just becomes a subconscious thing. It's like taking a breath or blinking. You know, you don't consciously do that. It just happens. It's learned behavior over time, and using your math skills becomes like that as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely.
I sometimes think it's interesting how, I know I used to do it in school, you'd get halfway through a sum and then it would seem a little bit difficult, so you'd just leave it and come back to it, or you'd say you'd come back later. But like, you'd never bring the ball right to the edge of the net and then say, oh no, we don't actually need that point. I think I'll just walk away from it and leave it to someone else. But when you put it like that, it probably is similar. You'd see something through to completion if you knew you had a piece of it left to do and you knew the number you needed to get to, you would actually see it through on the pitch. So it's probably something similar in your maths in the classroom. Thanks for that, Davy. And what about you, Lynn? Would you find that maths makes an appearance in your hobbies or your interests outside of work?
Yes, for sure. Maybe in a hobby that a lot of people might not think is related to maths. I used to play a lot of piano. I still play a bit. I'm learning different instruments. It's all related. But I think, you know, for those who think that, you know, they're artistic and they're creative, but they must be not good at maths, I totally disagree with that. I think if you're good at music, if you're good at, you know, art, you can be 100% really good at maths, because there's so much maths involved with music. So for example, take piano, or for example, if you have to read the music, every piece of music comes in different keys, right? So there's low key, high key, there's a positive key with major key, minor key, and you know, and everyone's voice, if you like singing, you know, there's different key. So sometimes you need to, there's a technical term called transpose. For those who learn music, you need to sort of bring it to a higher key or lower key to suit your own voice. So that transposition, that is maths, because that's about calculating, you know, how much is the number of keys, the number of steps, I guess, in between from one key to another. So for E major to A major or F major to C major, you have to calculate that, you have to count that, and then that gives you that next key. And then from that, you can work out what all the other key and notes is supposed to be. And then you play accordingly to make the song sound exactly the same, but just in a different key. So that's one example. And in relating to music, and also the rhythm. Sometimes if you like a song to be a little bit faster or a little bit slower, you know, there's like the timing. So you have 2/4 time, 6/8 time, you know, and that's to do with how many keys you have in one bar in the music. So you can also change that, you know, depending on whether you want a faster, slower. So, but they can be consistent. So if a 6/8 time, there's like 3 beats, 1, 2, 3 in one bar, but you can make it 1 and 2 and 3, or 1 and 2, 3, you know, like changing the speed. But that's also maths, you know, if you come to think about it. So, you know, I think definitely there's maths everywhere. You just gotta look for and pay attention to it. Yeah.
I think something else I wouldn't have always thought of as maths, but it's related to music at the minute when I go into Spotify, and sometimes I'll just choose a playlist that I haven't, you know, come up with myself, and then the most played song will be at the top. And sometimes I know I don't always know the name of a song. I might know the lyrics, but I wouldn't know what the name is. And I often find I get a great selection of really popular songs because the count of plays it's had is bringing it to the top of a list. So maths is kind of creeping in there where you get a feel for what's popular and what people are listening to, and then you get to enjoy it as well. But it is ultimately driven by maths a little bit in the background.
For sure.
Moving on to something that's a little bit simpler, but still somewhat related to maths. Do either of you have a lucky number, and why? Davey?
Yeah, I would have, Orla. My lucky number would generally be my birthday. Or if I was picking a set of lotto numbers, I'd pick my birthday, my parents' birthdays, my brother's birthday. You know, so certainly that would drive my lotto picks or lucky numbers.
We're all hoping they're going to be lucky, and then you can just share the winnings with all of us. Use some fractions to share the winnings with all of us. What about you, Lynn? Do you have any lucky numbers?
I think just from my Chinese sort of cultural background, like number 8, as everyone knows, is like the lucky number. You know, it's just because the 8, the sound of the 8, in Chinese, the pronunciation is related to get wealthy, and that's somehow, yeah, and that's become, and that on the other hand, like that's why number 4 is like the most unlucky, just because it's in the sound of 4 in Chinese means death. So that's for some reason that it's very superstitious. I'm not promoting that here, so I'm just saying 8, you know, if I can choose 8, I'll choose 8, but you know, let's see.
I would also like to have lucky numbers in a full set that would allow me to win the lotto. So if either of you have those numbers, I would like I'd like to be made aware of what they are. When you think back to doing your maths homework when you were in school, what advice would you give to, say, school Orla, school Davy, or school Lynn as to how to tackle it? So if I could talk to me doing my homework now, I think I would say try and understand where you're already using this. So if you're working on addition, you already know how many friends you have in your friend group, and you know, adding another person to that, and how many people you can bring in the car when you go to the cinema, or you go to, you know, see a match, or you know, if someone in your family is expecting a baby, you're adding another person to the family. And I think applying all of the basic mathematical concepts to your real life can really help you understand and feel more confident in how you're using math. I think sometimes it's hard to see where you're going to need these things. It's like saying you can't add X's and Y's, but then in real life you can't add apples and oranges, some people say. And I think when you bring it down to something that you encounter every day, it's a lot easier to then get to grips with what your teacher is trying to tell you or to teach you. So would you have any advice for you doing your homework, maybe, let's say 10 years ago?
Yeah, or for me, Orla, I would say to people two things. One, you've kind of touched on earlier. If you're struggling with a problem, sometimes the best thing to do, particularly with a math problem, is just get up, leave your desk, go away for a half an hour, or do some other subject, and come back. And it's incredible how often you find when you come back to it, you just think of something slightly differently. So I suppose the key thing is don't give up. If you can't get it now, come back to it a bit later on, or you know, get some help off your parents or a teacher, or a friend. But don't give up. Like, all three of us work in maths, or have maths related jobs, but have all met math problems that we couldn't solve, or
and continue to do
couldn't.
it every day.
Yeah, or certainly that we couldn't initially, and then, you know, you work your way around it. So don't give up is the key thing. And you will have times where it seems really, really hard. But that's also what's challenging about it, and what's interesting about it is that there are really hard problems. You know, so it's kind of exciting that there's problems there that are challenging. Even the smartest people find them hard to solve. So that would be the first thing that I'd say. The second thing is just when you're doing your maths homework, I'd say don't absolutely fly through it. I think some people do that, so you get 5 questions, you do them as quickly as you can, you don't think about it, and you move on to your English homework.
I always did that. Just get it done as quick as you can.
Yeah, so I think with that, if your teacher gives you 5 questions, there's a good chance that the first and the second one are probably quite simple, but the third and fourth are a little bit trickier, and the fifth one is the hardest. And if you fly through them, you'll always find the fifth one is the one you got wrong because you didn't quite read the problem right, or you didn't see the extra little difficult bit that had been added on from the first few. So take your time with them and, really try and get them right. And that's probably the best way to learn. And yeah, so that'd be my 2 tips.
What about you, Lynn?
Yeah, all really good tips. What I have to add to that, I think if I had to give myself advice, I would have preferred if I did more, I guess, talking, I guess, about the problem I'm stuck on, say, because I found that sometimes some math problem can be so abstract or so complex. There's so many informations, and we can just get so lost in it, and it can be a bit, yeah, or hard to digest altogether. So if you sit back and just try to put it together in your head and imagine, and go and find someone if you can. I don't know if you can find someone like maybe your granny or someone who don't mind listening to you, and just try to really break it down, try to break down the problem, explain to someone who have totally no background to this. Just, this is what I'm trying to do, this is the problem, and from doing that, and I think you can probably figure out the answer from just actually talking. Because sometimes if you have to explain something to someone, you actually have to understand that even better. It forces you to think more, and I think that would have helped me a lot more to really grasp the logic, the topics. That's
a really good one, because I
Yeah.
think even outside of the classroom, you can use that when, say, if you're in a shop and you don't get the right change and you notice that you haven't received the right change, if you can comprehend in your own mind how much you've given them, how much you should have received, when you go back up to the counter to ask for the correct change, it's a lot easier to have that discussion with the person in the shop, because you know what your points are in terms of like how much you should have received back and how much you're short in what they've given you. So I think that's actually a really good piece of maths advice in general in life.
Yeah.
Probably related to that as well is it's often really good to draw out a diagram or a little picture for yourself, so your brain can kind of look at it slightly differently. So if you're looking at something one way and you just can't figure it out, maybe it's just come at it a different way if you think of it visually, or use objects or something to try and come at it from a different way, that you might have a better chance of understanding it. But yeah, I think that's really good, Lynn.
I assume you do that in sport when you draw up a team plan or something on a whiteboard where you show where everyone's going to be positioned on the field. Would you do that kind of thing when you're playing GAA?
Yeah, you'd have your formation, or what way the team was going to line out. So what you might have is a little whiteboard with markers, and you move them around as players are moving around, different strategies. So rather than just talking them through, it can be easier for players to see it if if little markers there, they can actually visualize what's going on. So it's a similar concept.
Yeah, I think when I was younger, I used to be involved with drama, and we used to do it on the stage as well, where you'd have a certain number of people in different rows so that they could all be seen, and then you'd have markings on the floors where they were going to stand. So I think those concepts of drawing a diagram or illustrating out a particular problem, as you said, Lynn, is actually very relevant in later and earlier life. One final question. I know for me, maths has brought a lot of interesting things into my life. It's allowed me to travel. It's allowed me to become friends with people who live all around the world, some of whom I work with and some of whom were classmates and work friends of mine who've gone to live in other places. And it's also allowed me to earn a living, which gives me a lifestyle that, allows me to have hobbies and interests and socialize with my friends in a way that makes me very happy. So, Davy, what would you say are some interesting things that maths has brought into your life?
For me, Orla, I'd say the most interesting thing has been the fact that it's enabled me to meet a lot of really good friends. So when I went to university, I met a lot of like-minded people, or people who had similar interests, or people who maybe just had a similar way of thinking or similar way of seeing the world. And then when I went on and started working, again, I met people like that, who've now become really good friends. So for me, that's probably my experience, or that'd be my response to that question.
And what about you, Lynn? Is there something really interesting that maths has brought into your life?
Yeah, for sure. Like it allows me to obtain actually a qualification, which definitely it's the enabler for me to be able to travel and work internationally, which is something which is amazing, and I'm definitely not taking it for granted. I know there's not a lot of jobs who have this kind of opportunity, so it's allowed you to travel and experience in different kind of culture, life, you know, seeing different things. So I'm really grateful to be able to have the opportunity because of the maths that I have done. Thank you.
Quite an impressive collection of things that maths have allowed us to do and continue to allow us to do, including hobbies, traveling, new friends, using it outside of school. I think for most of us, we're using it more outside of our school settings and work settings than we do inside. So hopefully lots of other people would see it like that as well. But thank you both for your time and for sharing the numbers in your day and for making today count for you both. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you very much for that. Orla, Lynn and Davy. Now that was just pre-recorded, but Orla, Lynn and Davy are with us at the moment, and if they are taking time out of work to be with us and answer any questions. Now guys, we're joined by Holy Rosary College in Mount Bellew in Galway, and who had, and I'm guessing that there's a fair few GAA fans in the class. Any Gaelic players in the class? Can you put up your hands? Yeah, we have a few. Mount Bellew, Moylock had a great run this year. So it's a big GAA hotspot there. Maybe we could start by asking, maybe, does anyone in the class there, can anyone tell us any times that they might have used maths today?
I don't know if you could hear that there.
We did. No, I think the face masks are a bit muffling, but you could repeat it there, Miss Moran.
Sheena was just saying that when you brush your teeth, you need to brush for at least a minute. So she counts that out in her head to make sure she's brushed her teeth correctly.
Okay, very good. You're very good. And tell me, how long would people wash their hands for?
Yeah, so Dahi said there for the length of the happy birthday song.
Okay, so we're talking about at least 20 seconds, aren't we?
Yeah, 20 seconds.
Yeah, great. See, all of this is maths, and all of this is people are using maths and they don't even know it, and then they're kind of thinking, oh, my brain doesn't do maths, but of course they all do. So guys, have you any questions for our three? By the way, Orla, Lynn and Davy work as actuaries, and that means that they spend their time calculating, using maths to calculate risk. So maybe somebody, Davy was talking about lottery numbers. Maybe somebody might like to ask him a question about lottery numbers.
Yeah, so Sean here has a question. Go on, Sean. Sean wants to know if he ever wins the lotto.
No.
Hasn't shared it with me if he has.
Unfortunately not, no.
Would you know off the top of your head, Davy, what are the chances of winning the lottery if you've just got one pick of numbers, one entry? Does anyone in this class know what it might be? Anyone make a guess?
Sinead is going to make a guess.
Is it 1 in a million or 1 in?
1 in 8 million.
So 1 in, how long is it? 1 million? 8 million. So Sinead said about 1 out of 8 million would be the chance of winning the lotto.
Okay, that's a good estimate, because there's about, what, 4.5 million people in Ireland.
Yeah.
Davy, would you or any other actuaries know what the odds are?
I don't play the lotto that regularly on, but
Yeah.
Orla, I think you're a bit of a lotto player. Eh?
I have played the lotto on occasion, but it's more on a wish and a prayer than it
Yeah.
is knowing my chances
Yeah.
are really good. But I suppose it's like rolling a dice, really. You know, the chance of getting any number on a dice is equal. It's equally likely you get any one of the numbers. So unfortunately, it's equally likely you get any one of the numbers in the lottery as well. And as we all know, there are quite a few numbers to choose from. But sadly, not being a winner, I can't say the probability is very high.
But that is the sort of things that now obviously I put you on the spot, but you might need to take a pen and paper out. But that's the sort of things that an actuary would be able to calculate, isn't?
Yeah. So say, I don't know how many numbers there are even in the lotto. Say there's 30 numbers, and there's 5 picks. So you've a 1 in 30 chance of getting your first number, a 1 in 30 chance of getting your second one, and so on. So, like very simply, it might be 1 over 30 to the power of 5, something like that, to get all 5 of your numbers. So like you could do it kind of high level, or you could put together a spreadsheet and try and, or something on pen and paper and try and do it, you know, in detail.
Okay, but it's an example of using maths to try and calculate something that mightn't be that obvious. So other areas might be about risk, about insurance, how much you might have to pay for your car insurance. That'd be based maybe on how the insurance company might assess you as a risk. So all you guys are probably going to be very high risk because you're not old enough to drive. But isn't that the sort of thing you might be working on?
Yeah, so I can say for me, I work in life and health risks. So that's similar to whether you stay healthy throughout your lifetime, how likely you are to get certain illnesses, the likelihood that you are alive or not alive at a given age, and then various different related risks. So for example, a pandemic is a risk we would have looked at quite a lot even before the current set of circumstances. And, you know, all of those risks that relate to kind of our general life, health and well-being and how those play out as we age. So my focus is really, you know, the humans and the human condition. So I know that Davy and Lynn work in a slightly different space, and they probably encounter different risks to those I would see on a daily basis.
Have we any more questions from the class?
Yeah, Tommy has a question.
If you're doing one part of maths for the rest of your life, what would it be?
One area of maths, is it?
So it could be time or maybe.
So if you could only choose one area of maths to work with for the rest of your life, what would it be?
That's a great question.
I'd go with probability anyway. So I'm not an actuary, but listen to everybody else. It seems to be probability seems to be the big one that's kind of important in terms of looking at risk. So chances of things being successful or unsuccessful, depending on your point of view.
Okay.
What about you, Lynn? What?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was just saying, yeah, statistics, which is where probability is. So statistics, and also anything combining with using computers now, it's like IT, maths together. There's a lot of room for that. You know, you can study that area if you're interested.
Davy, what? Have you a favorite?
I'd say, yeah, probably what Brian said, probability, because if I want to put a bet on the football games at the weekend, I need to use that as well. So
yeah, I think I'm an engineer, by the way. So I think my area would probably, I'd be leaning towards geometry. If you're building things, even you look at your lovely room there, you see the fantastic framework holding it up. All of that's what I look at, the triangles and the shapes. So another question in the front.
Yeah, so baby, you need the question.
What bit of math is like most important? Like is adding or measurement.
Okay, there's a hard question. What part of maths is the most important?
I think maybe an unpopular one, but I think actually understanding what you're trying to work out is the most important. Like both for us in work and then when I was in school, like we used to get this advice: read the question, reflect on what it's asking you, and then respond to what the question is. And I think the read reflect part of any maths problem is just essential, because if you don't really understand exactly what it is you're being asked to do, it's very hard to do it. And in English or history or geography or Irish, the question just is what it is, you know, and you just respond accordingly. Whereas I think in maths, you need to digest it a bit before you can actually answer it. So for me, I think that's the most important, almost just translating maths into English and breaking it down into, well, what am I really being asked to do here? You know, it's saying solve for X and Y, but is it simultaneous linear equations, or, you know, what is the actual computation part that I'm working with here? So from my perspective, I think understanding the question is just the most important thing to do in maths, and to put a bit of time into when you're, you know, you're doing your homework, or maybe when you progress on to junior cert and leaving cert and you're trying to get through past papers. You can make so much progress once you know what exactly it is you're being asked to do, and it saves a lot of time as well.
That's great. I would say as well that if you're saying what's the most important part of maths, I would say it's probably the basic maths, because you have to build on that to learn the rest. So, you know, it's very important for everyone to be able to know their numbers and to count and to be able to calculate their change and things like that. But all areas, I mean, all areas are important somewhere. There's another question.
Janine, another question?
When and why did you come up with the idea for Maths Week?
So Sinead asked, when and why did you come up with the idea of Maths Week?
Well, I have to say, Sinead, that's a very good question. People laughed at me when I said we should have a Maths Week, and they said nobody would be interested in that. And the reason I did, because I'm an engineer, and engineers, we use maths a lot. And I was talking to I do a lot of work doing shows with engineering or with science, and showing people, trying to get people interested in science, engineering and computing and maths. And what I realized was there's so many people didn't like maths and had bad experiences. So I knew, because I was doing all sorts of fun maths, I said, look, we need to let people see the fun side of maths. Imagine if you were playing, say you're playing football, and you go down training, and every day you just do sprinting up and down the pitch, or you just do balls drills. That's not as much fun as playing a match, and you have to do that if you're going to get good. But sometimes in school, what we're doing in maths is really the equivalent of doing all these drills, and we don't get to do the fun stuff so often. So I thought if we had a Maths Week, then we could have, people could see other sides of maths, fun sides, and also they could see how important maths is going to be in the future. So really it is about, Maths Week is about trying to show people that maths is going to be useful, and that also when I was younger, a lot of people believed, everyone say, oh, somebody's mathematical or they're not. Now we know that you're not born with a maths brain. It's like anything else. You have to work at something. So if you have a good attitude towards maths and you work at it, then you'll do well in it. And that's why we set up Maths Week. And I am really, really surprised with how big it's got. As I say, 1/3 people are participating at the moment. It's the biggest Maths Week in the world. And it was really down to all the teachers around Ireland who have adopted it and who run it in all their schools. So that's where Maths Week came from. I don't know where it's going to. Okay, have we lost our school? Are they still there?
No, the school seems to have dropped off. So you could wrap up.
Okay, yeah. So to all the obviously a teacher came in there. There must have been another class waiting to come in. So thanks very much to Holy Rosary in Mount Bellew. Thanks very much to Lynn, Davy, and Orla, who are actuaries, and to Brian Donnellan, who is the Engagement and Education Officer with the Society of Actuaries, in Ireland. And thank you to all the schools who joined us online for this event. We have lots more events and activities coming up for the rest of the week, and all details are on mathsweek.ie, or you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and other platforms to find out what's going on. So thanks very much, guys, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks,
All the
Owen.
best. Thanks, Owen. Thanks, Ben. Take care.
Thanks, guys. Okay, we done?